She found a wounded man in the desert. What he said next shook her to her core and threatened to change everything she thought she knew. The tracks in the sand weren't random. Clara knelt down, her fingers brushing across the uneven patterns where someone had slid from the rocky ridge above. It wasn't the usual signs of a stray rider or a careless traveler. No hoof prints, no boot marks, just bare feet that had stumbled, slipped, and dragged through loose earth as if a man had been running blind in the night and nearly lost his life tumbling down. But what caught her breath wasn't a fall, it was the blood. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. The drops weren't scattered. They ran in a line, purposeful, straight toward her small homestead hidden in the desert. Whoever left that trail wasn't lost. They knew exactly where they were going. Clara had lived alone in this place for 3 years, buried in solitude after her family had vanished. People whispered it was an attack by native raiders. She chose this patch of desert because no one came here. It wasn't on maps. No traders stopped by. No riders passed without a reason. And yet someone had walked bleeding through the night straight to her doorstep. Her chest tightened when she saw him. The man lay slumped against the red rock, his body trembling with every breath. His shirt was dark with blood from 3 arrows still lodged in him, another cut deep across his ribs, and raw rope burns carved into his wrists. He'd been tied, tortured maybe, and somehow slipped free. He should have been dead. Yet he was alive, his chest rising raggedly, his hand clutched tight to a leather pouch at his side. Clara crept closer, torn between fear and pity. When his eyes opened, dark and steady despite the pain, her blood ran cold. "Clara," he whispered. She froze. He knew her name. "I was told you lived out here," he gasped, forcing each word. "Told you might be the only one who could help." Her pulse hammered in her ears. No one knew she was alive. She had vanished after the attack, burying herself in silence, so whoever had slaughtered her family wouldn't return to finish what they started. Yet this man spoke her name as though someone had led him here on purpose. He tried to reach for the pouch at his waist, his movements clumsy but deliberate. "There's going to be a war," he said, "between your people and mine. In 3 days." His voice cracked, and he pressed the pouch against his chest. "These papers, this is proof. Proof it's been planned by someone else." Her knees felt weak. War? What war? She hadn't heard news in years. She had cut herself off from the world, scraping a life from the desert in exchange for safety. But as she met the fire in his eyes, a familiar dread returned. The same feeling she'd known the night she lost everything. Then he said something that shattered her. "Your father is alive." Clara's stomach dropped. The words hit like a blow. She shook her head. "No, he died with my mother and brother. I found their wagon. I buried them myself." The man's eyes burned into hers. "You found what they wanted you to find. Your father escaped. He's been hiding, gathering evidence of who really ordered the attacks that killed your family." Her throat went dry. The wagon had been nothing but ash and charred remains. Her mother's ring and her brother's boots had been all she could save from the fire. She had buried them and mourned for 3 years. But the man's conviction unsettled her. "Evidence of what?" she demanded. He winced, struggling to sit up. Blood seeped fresh from his wounds. "Someone's staging raids, making it look like my people are attacking settlers, making it look like settlers are trespassing sacred land. It's neither. It's a third hand. They want both sides to burn each other to the ground so they can take everything left behind." His hand gripped the pouch tighter. "These documents prove it. Names, dates, payments. Your father risked everything to get them to me." A gust of desert wind swept over them, carrying the scent of rain. Clara's heart twisted. She didn't want to believe him. She couldn't. But then he reached slowly into the pouch and pulled something small wrapped in cloth. When he opened it, she staggered back. It was her father's pocket watch. The silver case glimmered faintly through the dirt, the same one he carried every day since her grandfather's death, the one she had never found in the burned wreckage. "He gave me this," the man said softly, "told me if anything happened to him, I was to find his daughter, the one who chose to stay and search for truth." Clara's eyes blurred with tears she hadn't shed in years. The inscription on the back was still there, for Thomas Bell. Time heals all wounds. Thunder rumbled far off. The man's breathing grew shallow. If I don't deliver these papers, if the truth doesn't come out, your father's sacrifice will be for nothing, and thousands will die for lies. Clara stared down at him, the storm rolling closer, knowing her life was no longer her own. The storm crept closer, the wind whistling through the rocks, but Clara barely noticed. All she could see was the man bleeding before her, clutching a pouch and a watch that should have been buried with her family. Her chest ached like it had 3 years ago, when grief hollowed her out and left her only with silence. She pressed her hand against her mouth, as if holding back the cry rising in her throat. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You could be lying. You could be anyone." He coughed hard, the sound rattling in his chest. "Would I have made it this far if I was lying?" He held up the watch again, his fingers trembling. "This was your father's. He trusted me. That has to mean something." Her hand shook as she took the watch, holding it close like it might burn away in her grasp. The feel of the worn silver against her skin made her heart twist. For years, she had buried the memory of her father's laugh, the smell of wood smoke on his coat, the way his rough hands would set her on horseback and tell her she was braver than she believed. To have even a fragment of him returned felt cruel. It made hope stir where she had taught herself never to hope again. "You said there's going to be a war," she murmured, forcing herself back into the present. 3 days. He nodded weakly, his dark eyes searching hers. "Both sides are ready to strike. It's what someone wants. If I die with this proof, no one will ever know. It'll all go exactly as planned." Clara knelt beside him, torn between reason and something deeper she couldn't name. She brushed her hair back, staring at the pouch he guarded like it was life itself. "What's your name?" "Daniel." "Daniel," she repeated quietly. It felt strange to give him a name, to make him more than just a stranger bleeding in the sand. She reached out and pressed a strip of cloth against the gash in his side. He flinched, but didn't move away. "You need help. You're not going to last much longer without it." "Then let me die here," he whispered, closing his eyes for a moment. "Take the papers to the meeting yourself." Clara's heart clenched. His words were calm, as though he had already accepted death. She couldn't. Not again. She had seen too many graves, carried too many burdens. She shook her head. "No, I'm not leaving you." His eyes opened, faint surprise flickering in them. "Why?" She froze, caught by the question. Why was she risking herself for a man she didn't know? She thought of her father, of the chance, no matter how small, that he was still alive. But the truth slipped out before she could hide it. "Because if you're telling the truth," she whispered, "you're the only link I have left to my family. And if you're lying, I'll know soon enough. But I won't let you die on my conscience without being certain." For the first time, a faint smile tugged at the corner of Daniel's mouth. It wasn't joy. It was gratitude, raw and painful. The rain started to fall in small drops, darkening the sand around them. Clara looked toward her stone dwelling in the distance, hidden under a rocky ridge. It wasn't far, but carrying him there would be difficult. "There's a cave system about half a mile east," she said. "But my home is closer. I have medicine there." Daniel tried to sit up, his face pale from blood loss. "I can make it if you help me." His voice was strained, but determination burned in it. "I have to. Too many lives depend on those papers." Clara slipped her arm under his shoulders. His body was heavier than she expected, his weight pressing against her as she helped him stand. When his skin brushed hers, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, human warmth. It startled her almost as much as the riders she suddenly heard in the distance. The faint thunder of hooves carried across the desert, nearly drowned by the storm. Clara froze, listening. 3 riders, maybe 4. The sound was steady, deliberate. Whoever they weren't lost travelers. Daniel tensed against her, his breath ragged. "They're not mine," he muttered, his voice dark. "Which means they're working for the ones who set this up." Clara's blood turned to ice. Whoever had staged her family's death, whoever had sent this man bleeding to her door, they were hunting him now. And by helping him, she had become a target too. "We need to move," she said firmly, adjusting her grip on him. "Now." He staggered beside her, leaving faint streaks of blood in the sand that the rain quickly swallowed. Clara pushed forward, the storm lashing against her face, the sound of hooves growing louder behind them. She knew one thing with absolute clarity. Her life of hiding was over. The rain came harder, soaking Clara's hair and plastering her clothes to her skin as she dragged Daniel toward the hidden shelter. Every step was a battle, his legs buckled under him, his breath shallow, his blood smearing her arm. The sound of riders carried closer through the storm. She prayed the rain would blur their tracks before the hunters reached them. Her stone dwelling appeared at last, carved into the hillside where her father had once reinforced the rock walls against storms. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing more than another outcrop. Clara pushed open the heavy wooden door and half-pulled, half-carried Daniel inside. She slammed it shut, the thick iron bolts clanging into place. The small room smelled faintly of smoke and herbs. A rough fireplace, shelves of jars and dried food, a narrow bed tucked in a corner. This was her entire world. Now was his too. She lowered Daniel onto the bed, her hands trembling as she saw the blood soaking through his shirt. "Lie still," she ordered, trying to steady her own voice. "You'll bleed out if I don't stop this." Daniel grimaced, his hand never leaving the pouch at his side. "If something happens to me—" "Nothing's happening to you," she snapped, sharper than she intended. Her voice softened. "Not if I can help it." She pulled water from a clay jug, tearing strips of clean cloth. Her mother had taught her how to close wounds, how to fight infection with herbs, but this was more blood than she had ever seen. Her hand shook as she pressed cloth against his ribs. He hissed in pain, his eyes squeezing shut. Outside, voices drifted closer through the storm. Clara froze, listening. "He's bleeding bad. Couldn't have gone far." Her heart pounded. The men were right outside. Daniel's breathing grew shallow, his face pale. "Promise me," he whispered. "Promise me you'll take the papers if I don't make it. Deliver them to the meeting." Clara's throat tightened. "Stop talking like that." She tied another bandage tight around his shoulder, her fingers slick with blood. "I won't let you die. Not here. Not now." A shadow passed across the small window. Clara held her breath, not daring to move. The storm rattled the door, masking the faint sound of boots outside. The hunters were searching. If they pushed that door open, she had nothing but an old rifle to keep them out. Daniel's hand found hers, weak but steady. His fingers were warm despite the blood loss. She looked down at him, startled by the trust in his eyes. "They'll use me," he said quietly. "If I die, I'm a martyr. If I live, they'll force a confession from me. Either way, I'll be the excuse they need to start the war." Clara swallowed hard, her chest heavy. "And my father?" Daniel's gaze softened. "He's been hiding under another name, gathering evidence. Every false witness, every staged attack. He's still fighting for the truth. He never stopped looking for proof of what really happened to your family. And he never stopped hoping you were alive." Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. "If he knew I was alive, why didn't he come for me?" Daniel's voice was weak but steady. "He thought you were gone too. Not until last month, when he saw smoke from your chimney, did he realize someone was living out here. He wanted to come, but it was too dangerous. Too many eyes on him." The voices outside faded with the storm, but Clara knew they'd be back. They weren't just searching aimlessly. They were hunting Daniel. And if they found him here, they'd kill her too. "How long until this meeting?" she asked. 2 days. If we leave tomorrow, we can make it." But Daniel tried to sit up, wincing. His jaw clenched as pain rippled through him. "I don't know if I'll be strong enough to ride." Clara met his eyes, her decision clear. "Then I'll be strong enough for both of us." He studied her for a long moment, like he didn't quite believe what she had just said. "This isn't your fight," he murmured. "You could stay here, let the world burn, and keep yourself safe." Clara touched the pocket watch tucked close to her chest. The cool silver pressed against her heart. "It became my fight the moment they took my family. And if there's even the smallest chance my father's alive, then I'm not staying behind." Outside, the storm began to break. Clara moved to the shelves, gathering what little she had, dried meat, bandages, ammunition for her father's rifle. Her hands moved quickly, but her chest ached with the weight of what was coming. She had lived 3 years in silence, convincing herself that survival was enough. But now survival wasn't enough. She turned back to Daniel. His face was pale, but there was a flicker of strength in his eyes. He had trusted her with his life, and for reasons she didn't fully understand, she trusted him too. "Rest," she said quietly. "Tomorrow we ride." Dawn broke cold and clear, the storm finally spent. Clara hadn't slept. She had sat by the window through the night, her father's rifle resting across her lap, listening for hoofbeats that never came. Daniel lay in the corner bed, his breathing uneven, his face pale with fever. More than once she thought he wouldn't last until morning. But as the sun crept over the desert hills, his fever broke, and his body stilled into a quieter rhythm. When his eyes opened, weak but sharp, relief washed through her so powerfully she nearly collapsed. "You're still here?" he whispered, his voice rough. "Where else would I be?" she answered, forcing a small smile. She dipped a cloth into cool water and pressed it to his forehead. "You're not rid of me that easily." He gave a faint laugh, then winced as pain shot through his ribs. Clara's hands trembled as she unwrapped his bandages. The wounds were still raw but cleaner than before. She told herself her mother would have done the same, kept him alive at any cost. Still, as she worked, she realized how long it had been since she had cared for another living soul. The simple act of touching someone else, of being touched back, stirred something buried so deep she almost didn't recognize it. "You've lost a lot of blood," she said softly, focusing on her task so she didn't have to meet his eyes. "I've lost worse," he murmured. Then, after a pause, "But I haven't had someone fight this hard for me before." The words caught her off guard. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She bound the last cloth tightly and sat back, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to get you out of here before those riders return." He shifted, trying to sit up. She steadied him, her hand firm against his shoulder. "Slow down. You're not going anywhere on your own." "I can ride," he said, though his jaw clenched with the effort of sitting. She shook her head. "You'll fall off before we're halfway. My mare's strong enough to carry both of us. You'll hold on, and I'll do the rest." Daniel studied her, his dark eyes searching. "Why are you doing this, Clara? You don't know me. You could walk away right now and save yourself." She looked away, her gaze falling on the pocket watch hidden under her shirt. "Because I've already buried too much," she whispered. "Because if there's even a chance my father's alive, then I can't run from this. And because I can't stand the thought of someone dying when I could have done something to stop it." Silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Then Daniel's hand, weak but deliberate, found hers. "You remind me of him," he said quietly. "Of who?" "Your father. The way he talked about you when he gave me that watch. Said you had his stubbornness. Said you never gave up on people, even when you should have." Her chest tightened until she thought it might break. She pulled her hand away before the tears could spill. She had trained herself not to cry, not to let weakness in. But his words cracked the wall she had built. She busied herself with gathering supplies, stuffing dried food and herbs into a leather satchel, her back turned so he couldn't see her trembling. "We leave as soon as you can stand," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. By the time the sun rose fully, they were outside, the desert air cool and sharp after the storm. Clara led Daniel across the rocky ground toward a hidden corral where her mare waited. The chestnut horse nickered softly at the sight of her, ears pricked as if sensing the urgency. Clara stroked the mare's neck, whispering reassurance before tightening the saddle straps. Daniel leaned heavily on her as she helped him out. His body shook with effort, but he clung to the saddle horn, refusing to let his weakness show. Clara climbed up in front of him, his arm instinctively wrapping around her waist for balance. She felt the weight of him against her back, the heat of his body, the trust in the way he held on. It startled her. How natural it felt. How long it had been since she had let anyone this close. She swallowed hard and clicked her tongue, urging the mare forward. As they moved north, the desert stretched endless around them. Daniel stayed quiet for a while, his breath warm against her shoulder. Finally, he spoke. Tell me about your life. Before all this. Clara hesitated. She hadn't spoken of it aloud in years. But the rhythm of the horse, the steady presence of the man behind her, loosened her tone. We were happy, she said softly. My father was building something here, a place for people to start over. My mother healed anyone who came to our door. My brother, he wanted to be just like father. She swallowed, her voice trembling. And then one night they were gone, and I was left with nothing but ash. Daniel's grip on her waist tightened gently. You weren't left with nothing, he said. You're still here, and you're stronger than anyone I've met. The words sank into her, warming places inside her she thought had died. She didn't answer, but for the first time in years, she felt something like hope flicker inside her chest. Ahead, the land rose toward the foothills. Behind them, faint as whispers, came the sound of riders again. Clara didn't look back. She only urged the mare faster, her jaw set. She had already made her choice. By midday, the sun was high, burning hot on their backs. The storm had left the air heavy, and the ground still damp in patches. Clara's mare moved steady beneath them, but she could feel Daniel growing weaker with every mile. His grip around her waist had loosened, his body leaning heavier against her. She slowed the horse near a stream that cut through a patch of cottonwoods. We stop here, she said. Daniel tried to argue. We can't. You'll fall off if we keep going, she interrupted firmly. 10 minutes. That's all. She helped him down, his weight nearly pulling her to the ground. He staggered, but managed to sit against a tree. Clara knelt beside him, pulling fresh bandages from her pack. His skin was pale, lips dry, but when she unwrapped his wounds, she saw they were healing faster than she had expected. Relief made her hands shake. You're getting stronger, she said softly, dabbing cool water over his shoulder. Stronger is a stretch, Daniel muttered with a faint smile. But I'm still breathing. That's something. Clara smiled despite herself. For 3 years, she had lived without another voice in her home, without laughter, without touch. Now, even his weak humor felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Tell me about your uncle, she said, tying the cloth snugly around his ribs. The one you said speaks for your people. Daniel's voice grew steadier as he spoke. His name is Joseph. He's the one who taught me peace takes more courage than war. While others wanted to strike back, he argued for patience, for negotiation. Many called him weak, but he never stopped believing both sides could live without killing each other. Clara finished with his shoulder and sat back. And this Samuel Crawford? Can we trust him? Daniel nodded. Your father thought so. Said Crawford was one of the few men in power who couldn't be bought. Clara looked down at her hands, stained with blood and herbs. If this goes wrong, if they don't listen, Daniel reached for her hand, his touch warm and firm despite his weakness. If it goes wrong, then at least we tried. At least we didn't stay silent. His eyes searched hers. You've already risked everything for me, Clara. That means more than you know. She wanted to answer, but the sound of horses cut her off. Faint at first, then clearer, coming from the south. Her heart slammed in her chest. They found us, she whispered. Daniel tried to push himself up. How many? She listened, counting the beats between hoof falls. 3, maybe 4. Same ones as yesterday, I think. He groaned, struggling to his feet with her help. Then we can't stay here. They climbed back onto the mare, Clara pulling the reins tight as she guided the horse toward a narrow trail that wound through the rocks. She pushed the animal harder than she wanted, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. There, Daniel pointed ahead, his arm brushing hers. A canyon. If we make it, we can lose them in the maze. The mare leapt forward, hooves striking stone as they neared the narrow gap. Clara's breath came fast, fear mixing with determination. But then Daniel stiffened suddenly against her. Stop, he said sharply. She pulled the reins hard. What is it? Those aren't the same riders. His voice was tight, uneasy. Look, Clara's heart thudded as men rode out of the canyon. Their faces were painted, their weapons ready, But there was no mistaking the way they carried themselves. These were Daniel's people. Relief rushed through her, but it was short-lived when she saw his face. "If they're here a day early," he murmured, "something's gone wrong. The meeting may already be in danger." The lead rider dismounted. His hair was graying, his eyes sharp with both wisdom and worry. Clara didn't need Daniel to tell her. This was Joseph, his uncle. "Daniel," the older man said in careful English, glancing at Clara with curiosity. "We feared you were dead." "I nearly was," Daniel answered, sliding weakly off the horse. He swayed, but managed to stay upright. He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "This is Clara Bell. Her father is Thomas, the man who gathered the evidence." Joseph's expression shifted at the name, his gaze softening with respect. "Your father is brave, Miss Bell, but he is in great danger." He gestured for them to follow into the canyon. "Come, we have much to discuss. Time is short." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her father, alive, in danger. She gripped the reins tighter as she guided the mare forward. For the first time in 3 years, the emptiness in her chest began to feel less like a grave and more like a path leading forward. The canyon walls rose high around them, red stone marked with carvings older than memory. Clara guided the mare carefully, her heart pounding with every step. She had never walked into a gathering like this, surrounded by men who could just as easily see her as the enemy. But Joseph's calm voice steadied her, and Daniel's presence at her side reminded her she wasn't walking this path alone. They stopped at a sheltered clearing where a fire burned low. Around it sat several tribal leaders, their faces grim, their voices low with worry. Clara slid from the horse, helping Daniel down. His body trembled with the effort, but he stood tall, refusing to show weakness. Joseph introduced her, speaking her name clearly. Some men frowned, their eyes suspicious, but none spoke against her. Clara clutched her father's pocket watch under her shirt, praying she had the strength to stand here. "The situation has worsened," Joseph said heavily. 3 settler families were burned out last night. Livestock stolen. To the settlers, it looks like our raiders. To us, it looks like settlers preparing for war. None of it is true, but anger grows like fire on both sides. Daniel's jaw tightened. "More staged attacks," he said. "They want blood before the truth can be told." An older leader slammed his hand on his knee. "Our young men demand we strike back. They say waiting is weakness." Clara's chest ached as she listened. The words were different, but the pain was familiar. She had lived with the rage of losing family, with the emptiness that made vengeance seem like the only answer. But here, in these men's eyes, she saw fathers and brothers who wanted to protect their people just as much as she once wished she could protect hers. "What if you could prove it wasn't your people?" she asked suddenly, surprising even herself. "What if you could show both sides who's truly behind these attacks?" All eyes turned to her. Clara's hand shook, but she pressed on. "My father gathered evidence. He risked his life for it. Daniel carried it here, almost dying on the way. Names, payments, witnesses who lied. It's all in that pouch." Daniel pulled the leather satchel closer, his fingers resting protectively on it. "It's enough to make them listen, if we get it into the right hands." Joseph shook his head slowly. The settler negotiator, Crawford, never came to the meeting point. "We fear he's been killed or taken." Clara felt her throat tighten. If Crawford was gone, if no one trustworthy stood on the settler's side, the war would come faster than ever. "Then we bring the truth to them," she said quickly, her voice trembling but clear. "Not to one side, to both, at the same time, so neither can say the other is lying." Daniel looked at her sharply, and she saw in his eyes that he understood what she meant. "You want me in the middle," he said. "Not as bait," Clara answered. "As a messenger, someone who can lay the evidence before both sides together, so they see it with their own eyes." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Some of the men looked doubtful, others thoughtful. Finally, Joseph spoke. "It could work, but it is dangerous. Whoever stands in the middle will have no protection. If fear takes hold, either side might kill him." Daniel straightened despite the pain pulling at his wounds. "Then I'll do it. I carried these papers this far. I'll see them through. Clara's stomach clenched. She wanted to shout at him, to tell him he couldn't. He was too weak, too wounded, too important. But when she met his eyes, she saw the same stubborn fire she had once seen in her father's. And she realized this wasn't about safety. It was about choice. "If you do this," she whispered, "I'll be beside you." Daniel blinked, startled. "Clara, this could kill you." Her voice shook, but her words didn't falter. So could staying silent. "I've hidden long enough. If my father is alive, if he's still fighting, then I won't let him stand alone. And if he's gone," her voice broke, but she steadied it, "then I'll finish what he started." Joseph studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Then we have until tomorrow's sunset. After that, no words will stop the blood." The leaders drifted into hushed conversation. Daniel lowered himself onto a stone near the fire, his body sagging with exhaustion. Clara sat beside him, her knees trembling. The night air grew colder, the canyon echoing with the sound of distant owls. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Daniel spoke, his voice low. "Clara, you could still walk away. You could hide again. No one would blame you." She turned to him, seeing the weariness in his face, the stubborn strength in his eyes. And for the first time in years, she felt steady. "I'd blame me," she said, "and I'm tired of living with ghosts." Daniel reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. His grip was firm, his palm calloused, but there was a gentleness in the way he held her that made her heart ache. They sat that way, hand in hand, while the fire burned low and the future loomed closer with every heartbeat. The next evening, the canyon became a stage for a gamble that could cost them everything. Clara stood at the edge of a wide clearing, her stomach twisting as two groups of armed men approached from opposite directions. On one side came the settler militia, rifles slung, faces hard with suspicion. On the other side, Daniel's people, their painted faces grim, their bows and spears ready. Between them, in the open space, Daniel stood alone. His back was straight, though Clara could see the pain in his movements. He had shed his warrior clothes, now dressed in plain settler garb, making himself look like a prisoner rather than a fighter. At his feet lay the leather satchel with the documents that could either save them or seal their fate. Clara's father was there too, alive. The sight of him earlier had nearly broken her, his hair grayer, his face marked with years of hiding, but his eyes still fierce, still her father's. Now he stood beside her, his hand tight around hers, both of them watching as the most dangerous moment of their lives unfolded. "This is madness," one of the militia leaders barked as they formed a half-circle around Daniel. "We came to negotiate, not to watch you parade a prisoner." From the opposite side, Joseph stepped forward with his warriors. His voice was steady but hard. "We came expecting to rescue our kin, not to see him standing here with you." The air grew heavy. Every man's finger twitched near his trigger. Every warrior's hand tightened around his weapon. Daniel raised his hands slowly, empty and open. "I'm not working with either side," he said loudly, his voice carrying clear across the canyon. "And neither of you are my enemy." The leaders sneered, but they listened. The burned homes, the stolen cattle, the raids on hunting grounds, Daniel said, his voice breaking with the effort but strong in conviction. "None of it was done by the people you think." "Lies," one of the settlers shouted. "We have witnesses." "Paid witnesses," Daniel cut him off sharply. He knelt and pulled out the papers, holding them high. "I have names, payments, false testimonies, all recorded, all here." Clara felt the tension shift. Men on both sides exchanged uneasy glances. Doubt had entered the air. Daniel's voice grew hoarse, but he pushed on. "Your families, your villages, your people, none of this had to happen. You've been tricked into hating each other. And while you destroy yourselves, others plan to take everything from under you." A hush fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. Crawford, the settler negotiator, finally stepped forward. Clara recognized him from her father's stories. His face was pale with shock as he read the papers Daniel laid on the ground. "These signatures," he muttered, "these are territorial officials." Joseph stepped closer, scanning the names. His voice was low, heavy with betrayal. "And these These are people from our own villages, paid to lie, to point fingers. Weapons lowered slowly as realization sank in. For the first time, Clara saw both sides not as enemies, but as men stunned by the same truth. Who's behind it? Crawford demanded. Daniel lifted the final paper, his hand trembling. The Territorial Development Company. They want the land, the mines, the railroads, and they want it free of both of you. Gasps and curses broke out. Joseph's face darkened with fury. So they tried to pit us against each other until nothing was left but ashes. Daniel walked into the exact center of the clearing, placing all the papers on the ground where both sides could see. I'm not giving these to one of you, he said firmly. I'm giving them to both. Equal proof, equal truth. Decide for yourselves if you want to keep killing each other for men who don't care whether you live or die. The silence that followed was long and crushing. Then, slowly, Crawford stepped forward. Joseph joined him. The two men bent over the papers together, reading line after line. Shock turned to anger, anger to grim resolve. Finally, Crawford looked up, his voice carrying. Then we stand together. We end this before it begins. Joseph held out his hand. His eyes, sharp and weary, met Crawford's. Joint protection, joint justice. No more lies between us. The two men shook hands. Clara felt her breath leave her in a rush, as if she had been holding it for years. Beside her, her father whispered, "It worked." His voice cracked, raw with relief. Daniel staggered but stayed standing, his face pale with exhaustion. He looked across the clearing, his eyes finding Clara's. And in that moment, through the chaos and danger, there was something unspoken between them, something fragile but real. For the first time in 3 years, Clara believed peace might be possible. 6 months later, the canyon of painted rocks looked different. Where once it had been the place of a near war, it had become a meeting ground. Fires burned at night, not for battles, but for councils. Families from both sides walked the trails, bringing food to share, settling disputes not with guns, but with words. What had nearly destroyed them had, against all odds, begun to bind them together. Clara stood in the center of it all, the memory of that night still sharp in her heart. She remembered the fear in her chest as guns were raised, the way Daniel's voice had carried over the canyon, even as his body trembled with weakness, the moment Crawford and Joseph had clasped hands and ended the spiral toward bloodshed. That memory was burned into her as deeply as the grief of her family's loss. But unlike grief, this memory carried hope. Her father was there too, alive, scarred, but stronger than she remembered. He had walked her down an aisle only weeks earlier when she had married Daniel. The ceremony had been simple, but it was unlike anything the territory had seen before. 2 families, 2 nations, joined in one place, not in battle, but in celebration. Her mother would have cried. Her brother would have laughed. Clara felt them both with her that day. Daniel's hand slipped into hers now, warm and steady. His wounds had healed, though he still carried the scars. He had survived when no one believed he would, and in surviving, he had changed the course of 2 people's futures. Do you ever think about that night? Clara asked softly. Every day, he admitted, not because of the danger, but because that was the moment I realized trust can be stronger than fear. Clara smiled faintly. She understood. Trust had been what carried them through. The trust her father placed in Daniel when he gave him the watch. The trust Daniel placed in her when he was bleeding in the sand. The trust they both placed in strangers who could have chosen to kill instead of listen. Nearby, children from both sides played in the dust, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. Clara watched them and felt her heart ache with something she hadn't let herself feel for years. Peace. It wasn't perfect. Old wounds didn't vanish in a season, but there was a path forward now. And that was more than she had dared hope. Her father joined her, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. You did it, he said quietly. You and Daniel. You gave them a chance at something better. Clara shook her head. We all did. It took every one of us willing to believe the truth mattered more than revenge. Daniel looked between them, his dark eyes steady. That's the lesson, isn't it? That lies and fear are easy. They spread fast. But truth, Truth takes courage, and peace takes more. Clara squeezed his hand, her voice low. And choosing peace doesn't just save lives. It saves what makes life worth living. The three of them stood together, the wind soft against their faces, the canyon alive with the voices of people learning, slowly, how to trust again. For Clara, the road from grief to hope had been long and bitter. She had lived in silence, convinced her world had ended. But when she chose to step out of hiding, to risk helping a wounded stranger, she found something she thought she had lost forever. She found family. She found love. And she found proof that even in a land of violence and betrayal, there was room for something better. The canyon of painted rocks became a symbol across the territory, a place where people remembered that peace was not given, it was chosen, and that sometimes the bravest act was not to fight, but to stand hand in hand and say, no more. That closes the story with a strong, emotional moral. Peace takes more courage than war, and truth is worth fighting for.